Hello everyone, and welcome back to QueenCityCardboard. Got a story game for you this time. A demo of a Werewolf the Apocalypse game. Don't know much about this going in, except the basics that I know about the Werewolf World of Darkness setting. I'm not familiar with any of Different Tales' work. What little story games I've played have mostly been Telltale games, but maybe this will be a different tale. Let's jump right into it. Controls, okay. Character sheet. Ooh, character sheet. Actual game mechanics come in. I mean, like RPG style mechanics. Should be interesting. The most I know about Werewolf is the basics. We are supernatural eco-terrorists, basically, because if the world gets too awful, then the worm will awaken and destroy everything. So, let's see what happens. Premonition. This is a game about rage, and how it helps us to do the things that need to be done, as well as the things we will later regret. Sometimes both. How do you feel about that? Great, I'm always angry. Alright, how do I want to play this? Typically in these kinds of stories, I play myself in the context of the game. I do prefer to think before I act. I prefer to. I don't always. So, you're the observant and cunning type. That's okay. There's no right path here. Just your decisions and their consequences. Let's just follow the path and see where it takes us. I'm a little spiritual. Cool. The woods are full of stars. They flicker, come closer, run away. They want me to chase them, to play hide and seek. I observe. Yeah. I watch as they dance around the tree trunks, float up on the gusts of wind that shiver through the branches, disappear among the leaves. There are words in their dance, but I don't understand them. Not yet. Then they bunch up and fly toward me like an arrow. Rushing down, they're soon upon me. But just before the spear of light pierces my breast, they disappear, and the dark of night returns. In the darkness, the spirits keeping the forest alive whisper about the enemy. I begin to move unnoticed, one with the night. And then I wake up. Right? Cold and alone. Confused, I open my eyes. The forest around me is thick, dark, and reeks of decay to such an extent that it's hard to breathe. I recognize this forest. I know this place. I've been dreaming about this forest since I was a child. The tree trunks, wrapped tightly in dark-leaved ivy, are covered in ripples of lichen where the vines haven't taken hold. The thorny, leafless bushes at their base are overrun with nettles. The fungi radiate with a ghoulish, sickly green light. Dark, sponge-like mushrooms cling to the fallen trees. Something is rotten. I can't shake the feeling that something died nearby. I look down and see my hands covered in a dark substance. I'm naked. A sticky, glistening film of liquid is clinging to my skin. I can feel it on my face and my hair. Blood. I'm alert. Nature is never quiet. The leaves rustle in the wind. Small creatures scuttle in the undergrowth. There is a whisper. I don't understand what it means, but the word resonates in my head. Garou. Who said that? There's a severed head right in front of me. Some choices are hard to make, and they strain your willpower. So I can lose willpower, or I can lose rage. Alright, so we've got rage, willpower, and health along the top. Rage, if I recall correctly, and if this follows the game, rage fuels your supernatural werewolf abilities. Willpower lets you will your way through failure or adversity. Health is health, obviously. And in the upper right, it says Maya Homid. Homid, I think, is the current anthropomorphic form you have. There's 5 shape-shifting forms with human on one extreme and actual like wolf on the other end, and they're not called guru. Krynos. I think Krynos is the name, is in the middle, and that's the full-on Wolfman, Hulk out, tear everything to shreds form. That's the combat form. But it looks like I'm human right now. I'm gonna be sick. Blah, blah. The face is contorted, the eyes bulging, the mouth open, the tongue stuck out. It's obscene. I feel bile rising in my throat and I start to retch. And then eyes open in the darkness. Who is it? I can see their silhouettes, shades of jet black against the darkness. They smell of fur and moss and bloodied earth. Massive creatures, some with horns, some with antlers. Their eyes burn like small, fiery windows into hell. I look at them and something wakes inside me. Panic. I get up and start to run. I catch my foot on a gnarled root and fall over. The brambles reach out for me, wrapping their thorny limbs around my legs. I struggle and fall face first into the ground. The moss covers my face and pushes itself into my open mouth, choking me. In a moment of clarity, I almost understand what the forest wants from me. And then I wake up. Gotta stop hitting the absinthe after 7. Arrival. Right. Maya Borodich. Okay, that is a character's name. Maya? Maya! Maya, wake up! I opened my eyes. My neck was stiff. It's nice that they give you indications of when certain stats matter. I'm guessing if my rage was higher, I might wake up more violently than I did otherwise. I opened my eyes. My neck was stiff. I stretched lazily as I assessed where I was out of the corner of my eye. I wasn't in the forest anymore. I was in a bus. The sun streaming through the windows was making it hard to see. The girl next to me was touching my shoulder, disturbed. I comforted her. It's all right. I squeezed her hand to comfort her. She looked at me, concerned. You had a bad dream. The memory of the wet earth clogging my mouth was still there. I fought the urge to retch. I looked outside. Trees were pushing up against the narrow road, their boughs tangled, their trunks carpeted with moss. It was the forest from my dreams. We're almost there, said the girl next to me. Her name was Anya. We'd met a couple of weeks earlier on the orientation day. She was from Norway, a tall, broad-shouldered, calm person who wore her long hair in braids. Somehow I'd managed to talk her into this crazy field trip across the land of my ancestors. She seemed excited. Anya reached into her backpack and took out 2 apples. I'm really happy we decided to come here, she said. Yeah, I said, offering her some of my kabanosy, dried meaty sausages that were so much better than the original Polish ones back in the US. I was glad Anya had decided to come with me. I had problems keeping friends around, and I really needed one. I did some searching, she said from over her phone, and this place is amazing. The last primordial forest in Europe. This trip was my idea. Our summer language course was starting in a few weeks, and I'd managed to talk Anya into skipping the tours of concentration camps and old churches and visiting Bialowieza National Park with me instead. Apologize for the butchering. So far, it's beautiful, she said, her eyes smiling. But why are we here again? Good question. Why were we there? There being Bialowieza, a small village in northeast Poland near the border with Belarus. It was famous for its national park, the very last European bison, and, according to a quick web search, occasional tensions between far-right troublemakers and the local Belarusian community. The most honest answer would have been, because I've been dreaming about the forest in Bialowieza since I can remember, but people didn't understand when I said things like that. I looked her in the eyes. I told her as much as I could. She seems trustworthy. I wanted to see the forest. I heard it was a must. That wasn't technically a lie. When I was little, my grandfather told me stories about an ancient forest full of wonders and the wolves that lived in it. It was all I got from that part of the family before my mom took me, ran away, and cut off all contact with my dad. But I remembered the stories well, and I remembered the name of the forest. Puszcza Białowieska. This will always be our home, my grandfather used to say. I waited for her to respond. Anya fell silent for a moment. I think it's great that you come from such a magical place, she smiled. The last ancient forest in Europe, thousands of years old. I wasn't sure if I was fond of that magic, but it was hard to ignore. And that was precisely why I needed to do something, anything about my future. That damn forest and my weird-ass family. But I had a clear goal in mind. I wasn't there by mistake. I'd planned this trip for months, with a clear goal in mind. I had to face the forest, learn the truth, figure out my destiny. I don't believe in destiny, but I do believe in the truth. And when someone works that hard to keep something from you, it's probably important. My grandfather's stories, the secrets, my mother running away. There was a mystery in my past. It was time I uncovered the truth about who I was. There was a mystery to uncover and an adventure to be had. I couldn't wait. Białowieża looked like an overexposed photo of a village with the contrast turned all the way up. It was a hot, sleepy day on a hot, sleepy street, and everything, the old trees, the yellowed grass, the weathered wooden houses, the fences, seemed almost normal. Everything except the shadows. They were sharp, as though they were freshly printed with the darkest of inks. And they moved. For a second, I could have sworn they'd moved, but then I realized it was just a black cat walking down the sidewalk. Cat. When it saw me, it stopped in its tracks. I tried to pet it, because of course I do. Why would you do anything else? Here, kitty, kitty, I said, squatting and reaching towards the cat. It rammed me affectionately with its head and started rubbing against my legs, totally ignoring the outstretched hand. Yeah, good kitty. See, low rage is good. That way animals get on better with you. Hey, Maya, Anya said, looking at me surprised. Didn't you say your friend would be waiting for us? But he wasn't there, and the cat was still staring at me. Let's go, Anya put on her backpack. I'm tired, and I really, really need to find a toilet. For a moment, I was tempted to just get out of the sun and worry about my missing friend later. But the meeting was just too important. Let's just wait a little longer, I said. I don't have his number, and we really need to meet up with him. His name was Bartek. I'd met him online while researching Białowieża. The man knew everything there was to know about local history. I asked him to check if anyone in town remembers my grandparents. I hope he's found something. I really need to pee. Anya said it like I was a 5-year-old, and not a very bright one. Well, you go into the place. Cafe, gas station, whatever. You can go. Fine. Let's go. I grabbed my backpack and stormed off, angry at Bartek, Anya's tiny bladder, and the creepy cat. No, don't be mean to cat. Cat is friend. Białowieża had a few hotels and hostels, but the preferred form of accommodation was bed and breakfasts. That's where we stayed. I found one that was nice, clean, and that had good reviews. We had a room on the second floor with a huge window and a great view of the forest. We dropped off our stuff and freshened up a bit. Maybe we should have waited for your friend, Anya asked, concerned. That's what I said! Okay, now I'm angry. I shrugged. I'll find him, sooner or later. Yet now you wish we'd waited. Before you go, check out your character sheet and journal, press respectively X or Y to open. You can find a load of useful information about Maya, her background, personality, goals, and so on. You can also check who your friends and enemies are. Alright. Name, age, profession, student. Whoa, that's a very sensitive... Okay, it goes by subcategory. I can't just scroll down a little bit. American. I am not brave. I am mildly inspiring and analytical. I am quite spiritual. That's... it's not cunning at all. Mind and body. Condition healthy. Goal, learn your family history. Pursue to regain willpower. Oh, cool. I like that. I think that might be how the tabletop RPG mechanic worked. I don't remember. I think it was. Like, you have a virtue and a vice, and whenever you pursue one at cost, or whenever you pursue your virtue or give into your vice, you have an opportunity to regain willpower. And then you can basically spend it to muscle through situations that you don't really want to deal with. So, sounds pretty on the nose. Relations. Anya friendly, family, it's complicated. Ain't it always? Alright, so I can close that, and I can check my journal. Indicates you need to spend some points. Cost. Okay, that's interesting. Because there's a difference between cost and effects. I can have an effect that I can't... that might not happen. Like, if something would cost me 1 rage point and I didn't have a rage point to spend, I couldn't do it. But if it's just an effect, then I lose nothing. Alright. Good to know. Variant. Indicates this choice is available because of your current status. Health is your life force. Alright. So you're not dead when your health goes to 0, you just can't function terribly well. Be careful when you rage. Good general advice. High rage allows Maya to overcome many obstacles, but also makes her aggressive and hard to control. Alright. Oh, and willpower can compensate for high rage. Oh, you're impaired when your willpower goes to 0. Alright, so there's mental impairment and physical impairment. Maya's friend from the university, she came from Norway. An activist. Cool. Alright, let's close that. Alright, but for now, I have other things in mind. I like this so far. I had a clear goal in mind. My family was entangled with this town and the forest, and I had to uncover my roots. Anya went with you. Going to the forest, doodly-doo-doo, going to the forest. Who are you? It was dark in the woods. Dark, humid, and chilly. The leaves didn't let through a lot of the sunlight. Daniel looked at Anya and me over his shoulder. How do you like her? We'd met maybe 20 minutes earlier. Anya had Googled local guides, and he was apparently the best person to go if you wanted to see the forest. So I found him, and now here we are. He was a strange one. But aren't we all? Daniel was a strange guy. Slender, but muscular. Not the CrossFit type. It was more the kind of strength you get from working all day long in the open. His skin was weather-beaten and bronzed by the sun, like tanned leather, and he moved in a very deliberate way. But his fingers were slim and delicate, and his eyes were the strangest shade of yellow-green. Red flag! So, how do you like her? I wasn't sure whom he meant. Do you mean the forest? I asked. Polish was a strange language that gave the most unexpected genders to objects and ideas. I mean, pusksa. He gestured around us. The words sounded like the wind rustling the leaves. Puszcza. Puszcza, okay. I mean puszcza. Puszcza is the right word, not forest. Forests are like fields or orchards. Cultivated. He spat as he said it. And puszcza, she is older than even the concept of fields. He was using the word as though it was a name. I looked at the puszcza again. I looked around with fresh eyes. I felt as though I'd entered an ancient tomb. Gigantic, dead trunks were decomposing slowly around me. Young plants and colorful mushrooms sprouting from them. The trees that still lived stretched towards the sky like columns holding up the vaulted canopy, which was blocked out all but a few rays of sunlight. There was stillness, and there was movement, darkness and light. If spirits existed, that place would be swarming with them. I loved what I saw. There should be more places like this, I said earnestly. Or more of this place. Daniel lifted his head and looked me right in the eyes. Yes, you're right, he said with a serious expression. Then I remembered why I was there. I was cautious when I asked my questions. You look like you know all the local legends and folktales, I said. I didn't elaborate why I was interested in the topic. Daniel stopped abruptly and turned to me, watching me for a while. His nostrils flared as though he were tasting the air. I don't share them with strangers, he said, and then hesitated. But for some reason, Puszcza doesn't think you're a stranger. Come on. He started walking. I know exactly what you need to see. That piqued my interest. Yay, willpower. So I was right. There was something hidden in my family's past, and it seemed to have a lot to do with the forest. Every time you learn or do something significant that brings you closer to your goal, you regain willpower. Yes, I was right. With every step, I was getting closer to solving the mystery, so I followed him. We have to choose a path, he said. There's the old wolf den, or I could show you the barrows first, or a clearing that some folks call a place of power. Ooh. Oh, that's interesting. Ooh. I want to go to the place of power. This is exciting, and so many choices. We started walking, but after a few steps he stopped abruptly, like he'd remembered something. Then he turned to me. Could you do me a favor, please? He asked. Sure. I'll do my best. Yeah, man, sure. What do you need? I smiled. He ran his hand through the moss on a dead tree trunk, smelled his fingers, and then reached into his pocket. He took out a small stone. An amulet? A personal amulet of his, maybe? I felt my hair stand on end and my nostrils widen for some reason. The smell of the forest grew stronger. The game tracks your decisions based on how Maya approaches problems. They will gradually reveal what kind of a person she is deep in her heart. The story changes to reflect Maya's personality. All right. So as your stats go up, you get a better sense of who your character is. Makes sense? I would like you to take this stone. He held out his open hand towards me. And throw it in the direction you think we should go. Was it a good idea? What? Why? I wasn't convinced. It's something I need. Can you do it, please? He was intense. Can you do it, please? I guess I'll give it a go. Sure, I caved. I took the stone and closed my hand around it. Be careful, whispered Anya. It was just a stone. Cold and rugged, it felt just like any other stone. I closed my eyes and thought about that place of power, trying to imagine it. Something like Stonehenge, perhaps? I felt my hand rising entirely on its own, and then throwing the stone as far as I could. When I opened my eyes, there was a path where the stone had fallen. I hadn't noticed it before. Okay, Daniel patted my back. Let's go. What happened exactly? The Pusha is sympathetic to me. Yay! I love you, Pusha. You were accepted, he answered with a faint smile before he turned to head deeper into the forest. Was I now? It started with the hair on the backs of my hands rising. The air around me seemed brighter, lighter. The leaves and the tree trunks turned yellow and my skin started to prickle. I realized that I couldn't hear anything except for a low buzzing that was filling my ears. I couldn't think. Words appeared and disappeared in my head faster than I could notice them. I had to do something. Snap out of it. I tried to clear my mind. I closed my eyes and tried to focus. This weird sensation was coming from within, after all. It just needed to find its source. But I wasn't the source, I realized. I was only resonating. The source was somewhere else. I opened my eyes. And when I did, I was looking straight at a clearing. I could see the silhouette of a person between the trees. They were moving slowly, deliberately. And the moment I noticed them, I felt the buzzing slow down. I approached. The clearing was a plateau between huge boulders. There were double-trunked trees between the rocks and an angular wooden construction that stuck out of the ground like a sore thumb. There was a bike leaning on it. But more importantly, there was a man, and he was moving in the most beautiful, harmonious way I'd ever seen. It was hypnotizing. I looked at him for a moment, and the way his muscles danced under his tan skin, trying to trace his movements. Before every grand gesture, every stretch, and every push, there was a micro-movement, an impulse from his core. But I could feel it was even deeper. The energy that had been filling me earlier took form. It was flowing in rhythm with his steps, with the flow of his hands. The words came out of my mouth seemingly without my knowing. What did he do? What did you do? He smiled. It's a little bit complicated. He stretched his hand towards me. I'm Cornell, he said with a hard German accent. Shouldn't you be on the logging site? Daniel asked him after I introduced myself. I needed to center myself, he answered. The others are still there, don't worry. They were cutting down trees in this forest? Wait, logging? Here? I couldn't believe my ears. He smiled bitterly. Yes, logging. Here. That's why I needed to calm down. This place is special, Daniel said. Some people call it a place of power, as I told you. And they have good reason to, Cornell added. Look around you. So I looked. It was a clearing filled with light. I could see Cornell's traces, a beautiful pattern on the ground, but there was one thing that caught my attention more than anything else. Fruit? In trees? The hell you say? The tower spoiled the serenity of the scene. Why the fuck is this here? I asked, pointing at the observation tower. I thought this was supposed to be a forest untouched by humans. People believed this was a place of worship thousands of years ago. Hence the fruit trees, the stone circle, and now the tower. And indeed, there's a lot of energy in this place. You felt it, didn't you? Yeah. Yeah, I felt it, I said with enthusiasm. The Pustya is wounded and in pain, and it calls out in rage to anyone who can hear it. Here, this call is louder. You see the logging. You see, the logging, his eyes darkened, is slaughter. Anya gasped quietly. Every priceless thing can be destroyed by greed. Logging is illegal, of course, but illegal is sometimes just a way of saying a bit more expensive, but still profitable, especially for huge corporations. The forest is hurt. The wound is getting bigger, as is its desperation. Why doesn't anyone know about it? I clenched my fists. This should be in the newspapers. People should hear about this. Cornell regarded me for a moment with a faint smile. You have a connection with this forest, don't you? You should come to the logging site and meet everyone. Absolutely, Anya said eagerly. Maybe he could help me with the dreams. He knows more than he lets on, and he's already let on quite a bit. I looked him over for a moment. Hey, did any of you maybe have strange dreams about this forest before you got here? He looked at me, a look of concern in his eyes. As I said, you seem to be connected with the forest, and very sensitive to the things that are happening here. Pay attention to your dreams, especially tonight. This place is known to communicate in that way. Sure, why not? He jumped suddenly and looked at the wooden tower, and the bike I'd noticed earlier. Der Schwalbe is getting restless, he said, and as Daniel pointed out, I should be on the logging site setting up the protest. Schwalbe? What is a Schwalbe? I asked, confused. He named his bike Swallow, Daniel explained. He loves it very much. Cornell grinned. Oh, I do. Nice meeting you, Maya. All I wanted to do was get out of there. The moment he disappeared, the buzzing came back. It wasn't as strong as before, but it was there. All I wanted to do was get out of there. Alright, I'm angry and willful. What else can go? No, nothing's gone wrong yet. See if I can max out my rage. We went on through the greenery, the buzzing in my ears slowly deceased. Ancient graves. My impulse is to go to the wolves' den first, but because, dogs. But I think this is what Maya would do. The trail soon disappeared. Sometimes we walked along a barely visible path made by some animals. Sometimes we followed a stream or gully. But for most of our trek, we walked through the dense undergrowth. Daniel looked like he knew the way, but I kept second-guessing him. I looked at the moss growing on trees, but it was growing everywhere. The sun was barely noticeable through the dense canopy, and it was on my left-hand side, which might have meant we were heading north. It was a pleasant walk. There was always a path through the brambles, the ground was even, and the branches stayed out of our way. I almost felt like the forest wanted us to find the way. Daniel was a mystery I decided to solve. I watched the efficient and deliberate way Daniel moved, and I tried to guess his background. Why had he become a guide? I asked a few obvious questions. So, where are you from? I asked the obvious question. From around here. He made a vague gesture. Are you a professional guide? That's what I do for a living. He wasn't very talkative. Leave him be, whispered Anya. Then it hit me, because I'm smart and know things. Suddenly it all came together and I realized what was so unusual about him. The way he moved, it was so natural, so effortless. No one who'd spent their childhood sitting all day at school or in front of a screen could move that way. Who are you, Daniel? I asked, bewildered. Were you raised by wolves or what? He looked me straight in the eyes, his irises a mesmerizing yellow-green. Yes, I was, he said with a poker face. Then he winked. Anya smiled uneasily. We continued in silence. We'd been walking for a while when I noticed that Daniel's steps had become slower. He was also looking around more often and he had hunched slightly. Was it the barrows? Are we here? Are we there yet? I asked. He froze for a second, as though he'd forgotten that I was there. They're tricky to find sometimes, he mumbled. Be quiet for a minute, please. That was when I felt it. Ash in my mouth. The smell of smoke and wet soil. And a pull. I know where to go, I said, surprised. He tilted his head. Okay, let's check it out. I pointed to the barely visible path to my left, under a dying tree. He followed me, and I followed my feet, knowing exactly where they should go. Under the crooked tree, past the dead tree trunk and the sponge-like mushrooms, across the patch of wet, dark green moss, all the way to a place that didn't look much different than any other parts of the forest. Until you noticed the mounds. There was something about the flattened hills that drew my full attention. Something that drew my attention. Because of all the dreams I'm having, I think I could just remember. A memory stirred in my mind. No, it wasn't a memory. It was a feeling anchored in my chest, akin to the taste of ash in my mouth and the smell of smoke. Longing. Sadness. Resignation. A sense of sacredness. It filled me with a calm excitement, and when I closed my eyes, I saw a fire burning in the darkness. The village was long gone, its houses burned to the ground, its people slaughtered. But the spirits, they were still there. They'd accumulated over time, some in ancient Roman armor, Some in rags, some in animal skins, some in uniforms from the World Wars, some in modern camo. "Are we dead? Where are we?" they asked me with frantic whispers. "Is this hell?" They were only echoes. I don't think it's paradise. But they weren't real, just echoes of the past. The spirits in the trees were real. When I opened my eyes, Daniel was watching me. "You were somewhere else," he said. "You said you had family here?" I nodded. "I heard that my father's family came from here." I nodded. "I don't know much about them, though." He sighed. "I don't think you should be here," he said tersely. "You're not ready." He knew something. Out with it. I've got rage to spend. "Why? What do you know?" I wasn't letting it go. About you? Not much, but I know the Pushcha. The past is close here." His eyes were worried as he looked at me. "And if the Pushcha calls to you, it's wise to listen, but it's not wise to get lost in the voices. Come." On the way back, I was lost in my thoughts. The voices in the vision knew what I had to do. It's almost as though it was expected of me. Was this what my family did here? Why had Daniel asked about my family? Was the vision showing me what my ancestors had done? I was scared. I trembled. A bigger picture was starting to come to light, and I wasn't sure if I liked what I saw. Dark magic was in my blood. I felt a little tired. The shadows of the enormous trees cooled the sweat on my skin. The taste of ash lingered in my mouth. That was stressful. Let's go see some puppies. The first thing I noticed when we stopped was a pine tree. A pine tree I knew. Small, twisted, and crooked, growing on the side of the hill, fighting for light and balance. Robbed of level ground, it had to make do. To adapt. Don't we all? Months before that, when I decided to come to Poland, I dreamed of that tree. I was sure of it. Just like I was sure that under its roots I'd find a burrow, and a few feet away, another one, like two dark eyes gazing at me as I approached. Daniel passed me and approached the tree. He pressed his cheek against the trunk. "Hello?" he said quietly. Oh, whoops. I said nothing, apparently. I looked around, but we were the only people there, so I remained silent. A sudden gust of wind threw a cloud of dust in my face and into my eyes. This is the den," announced Daniel. "It's abandoned, of course, but still worth seeing." Why was it abandoned? What happened? "Humans happened," Daniel sighed. He sat under the tree, leaning his back against it. "It was a hot spring morning when they found this den. No one knows who the men were, even though it was only one human generation ago. There were 6 cubs here under the roots of this tree." He'd stopped stuttering and seemed to enjoy telling the story. I enjoyed listening. I like stories. There was something calming in his voice and the way he talked. His slow gestures and wistful eyes made me feel as though I was with the cubs on that hot spring morning. "I don't think they wanted to hurt the wolves," he continued. "They probably thought they'd been abandoned. That's why they took the cubs with them. Humans have this instinct that makes you try to befriend everything, especially if it's dangerous." Befriend? 6 of one, half a dozen of the other. I didn't disagree. When you put it that way, I answered, unsure. I'm not saying it always works out, but the intention is good, and I believe the men who kidnapped the wolves wanted to do something kind, he continued. Anyway, they took them. Out of the 6, 2 lived to see the cold summer that year. The wolf mother used to come to the farm they were at and howl. People went gray if they heard her. I knew that howl. And suddenly I heard that howl. I knew exactly how it sounded, and I felt despair and longing gnawing at my soul. I remembered how the cubs had reacted. They howled in response. Every time she came, we howled back through the closed door, letting her know we were still alive, that there was hope, that we would grow up to be strong. Maya, are you okay? Anya asked, putting her hand on my shoulder. I felt for the cubs. I just feel for the cubs. I know a little about divided families myself. Oh. Yeah, that usually ended the conversation. Daniel sighed, looking at the tree and the burrow. The cubs that survived were sold to some people in Hajnoka, but after a while, both of them ended up back in Białowieża with the scientists. They have a station in the national park. One of the wolves, Kazan, was a celebrity of sorts. Kazan? If you saw any wolf photos from here, they were probably of Kazan. He was even on postcards. I kept thinking about the mother. I wonder what happened to the mother. There's something missing from the story. I also felt like she was more important than the story made her out to be. What kind of wolf was she after all that? That's a good observation. She eventually stopped looking for her cubs. She came back to the forest and found new children. There was a slight gust of wind, and the tree creaked. I remembered that sound from my dreams as well, a sound that made me feel safe. What happened to Kazan? I felt like I knew Daniel well enough to ask for that. Is Kazan still alive? He lived for 8 years in the park. Daniel looked at me with his yellow-green eyes. Until they let another male wolf into his pen. I held my breath. They fought over the she-wolf, and Kazan lost. Anya looked up from her phone. I've read about that. She sounded upset. They didn't notice he was wounded. It took him 3 days to die. Daniel shrugged. He lived a long life and died fighting. It was good. He looked at the burrows for a long time. This place is my friend, so I try to keep it important and respected. I think it's my mission, you know? I could relate to that. I think I understand. Every family had a story worth remembering. Daniel looked at the tree one last time. Goodbye, he said. I also said my goodbyes. The forest was alive around us, vigilant but not alarmed by our presence. I kept thinking about the stolen cubs. The B&B was quaint. When we got back, we were both drained. We were soon curled up in our beds. What a day, Anya yawned. So, what do you think? I made a quick mental inventory of everything that had happened that day. Wonder how many of these I get to choose from. I was definitely moved by the story of the wolves. The wolf's cubs that were kidnapped and died in captivity, I sighed. The story stayed with me, you know? She put a hand on my arm. Divided families, huh? It's okay, Maya. Place of power sure made an impression. I felt a strange energy in the place of power before we met Cornell. It still freaks me out. Cornell seemed cool, though, Anya answered, and he seemed to really understand what you're going through. Yeah, but they were cutting down the forest. I can't believe they're logging here, I shook my head. Isn't the forest on a UNESCO list or something? Yeah, I know. I want to check out this protest people were talking about. Maybe we could go there tomorrow. I was freaked out by the vision at the barrows. Something strange happened when I was visiting the old barrows, I said, and instantly regretted it. Never mind, I was probably just dehydrated. Yeah, it was probably it, but you looked weird. She laughed nervously. A lot of things today were weird if you think about it. I mean, Daniel was a strange guy, but he had his reasons. I didn't feel like talking anymore. Let's call it a day, shall we? Soon we were both in our beds, ready to sleep. I lay in my bed for some time, trying to make some sense out of everything that I'd learned and experienced that day. The gibbous moon was shining through the window. A gentle wind was blowing. When I closed my eyes, I could still see the weird vision I had that day. My roots were here. I could feel them, almost touch them, and they were reaching to me. I felt I was closer to getting my answers. I felt that the answers I was looking for were within my reach. I should go and see the logging protest, find Cornell, and make him talk. After a long while, all these thoughts became blurry. They slowly started to turn into pictures, sounds, and colors. I drifted off. Hey, I have that game too. A night in the woods. Two black holes underneath a crooked tree stare into the night, quiet and vigilant. My senses are heightened. I see the moon cutting the sky in half. I am a cub. I am a wolf cub, like the ones my grandfather told me about. I will grow and my fangs will become sharper. I will taste blood. I feel a pull and I surrender to it. I run toward a clearing. There are piles of fresh corpses of people who died too young, skinned and mutilated. Their loved ones stand around them, grieving, unable to do anything. Waiting. And suddenly, they are just trees and tree trunks. I howl. I look at the moon and I howl. The trees are dead and I'm the only one left to sing their story. There is a stench in the air like meat rotting in acid, but somehow worse. I see the monstrous army. Their mandibles are whirling chainsaws. Their long metal arms are wrapped with black pipes that look like glistening intestines. Their smell is vile. They wait, unmoving. I charge at them. I try to breathe through my mouth as I run towards the machines. I hit and kick them blindly, screaming at the top of my lungs. And in my own screams, I hear strange whispers. They tell me to look at the sky. There, Between the stars, two shapes circle each other. An old sad wolf with gray hair and a white weasel. They keep their eyes on one another as they continue their dance, suspicious, but not hostile. We need to fight the enemy, the awful rotting stench. I know that much. But how can we do that when we don't trust each other? They stop. They look at me and the clearing. I sing to them. I sing to them in words that I don't recognize, but that I understand. They come down to me, and their voice is the voice of the Pushcha. Welcome back. You've been away for too long a time. The end. The Maya you played with was a storyteller born under the gibbous moon. Oh, so you can, when you play the full game, you get to generate your characters to some extent? I forgot about that, but yeah, which phase of the moon you're born under is kind of like a zodiac sign. It informs some of your characteristics and starting skills. That was really good. Oh, I want the full version of this game. I love the choices. I love that they tell you when your stats influence the story, but they aren't too explicit about it. This would benefit from a lot of replays, and that was just the demo. I really want the full version of this. I hope you enjoyed this, and when I do get the full one, maybe I'll continue where we left off. Maybe I'll start over completely, go through character generation, or I might just try to play up from where this ended and go from there. But until then, I really hope you enjoyed this half as much as I did. This was... oh, that was good. And it shows how much depth there is to role-playing games. This could have been a role-playing session, easily. And there was no combat, there was no mechanical combat, it was just characterization and plot advancements. Oh, I really want this now. But I'll save that for another time. Until then, thank you for listening, and as always, play to learn, play to live.